Hello, good morning and welcome. It's Thursday, October the 9th. I'm Anne McElvoy from Politico and Sam Coates from Sky News is on his travels with the Prime Minister in India. Conference season 2025 is over for all but the SNP meeting in Aberdeen and Clyde in Swansea at the weekend. The politicians, the pollsters, the journalists, we've all rolled our wheelie cases back home. But did the speeches, the policies, the briefings move the dial? Well, Sam and I invited Patrick English from YouGov to compare some of the polling and give his assessment of where we are. That was recorded in Manchester at the Politico Pub at Tory conference just before Sam disappeared on that Keir Miles trip. So it's a catch up from me today, and dominating the news is the announcement from Donald Trump that the first phase of a peace deal between Israel and Hamas has been concluded, including an agreement for the release of all hostages taken 2 years ago this week in the October 7th attacks, alive or dead. The plan also includes the withdrawal of Israeli troops from Gaza, and Keir Starmer has called it a moment of profound relief. All eyes now will be on whether both sides will respect the conditions and can achieve a lasting peace in the negotiations ahead. Those remarks were, of course, issued while the Prime Minister is on his 2-day whirlwind tour of India. A press conference later today means that domestic issues could have followed him there. Politico's Sam Blewett will be alongside two Sams, in fact, travelling with the PM. And Playbook is pointing out that the controversy over the China spy case and why the prosecution collapsed is likely to play a role there at that press conference. Digital ID schemes, Keir Starmer leaning into that proposal despite some pushback. He is enthusing to the travelling press about the significant advantages and maybe pointing to India's vast digital ID scheme as part of a model for the UK. Well, Sam, the Coates one, that is, was in transit this morning at our usual recording time, so he sent us this update with everything we need to know about Keir Starmer's day ahead in Mumbai.
Hello, Anne, from the 12th floor of the Taj Mahal Tower in Mumbai. It's around 4 a.m. UK time, 8:30 a.m. India time, and Keir Starmer is already up and about on the second and final day of his India trip. I have to say, Anne, it's been so intense, not only because of the hours, we're trying to squeeze in a trip to the other side of the world in under 72 hours, but also the heat and the incredible humidity and the sheer numbers of people that are accompanying him on this biggest ever business delegation. Now, I can't join you for our usual 6:40 record slot because the big event today is a massive fintech event. It calls itself the world's largest fintech festival for a better world powered by AI. I wonder whether that's a badly written slogan that is actually AI generated. Anyway, it's here that Keir Starmer will meet Narendra Modi, and after that he will give a press conference and then fly home. So we've got to get into that fintech event, which is why I can't be with you. What are Keir Starmer and Narendra Modi going to talk about? Well, we pressed yesterday on whether there's anything Keir Starmer can do about India buying Russian oil, and Keir Starmer said he would work through the issue in a pool interview. So that sounds like don't hold your breath. There are plenty of outstanding bits of the trade deal between the UK and India. Of course, it's not been implemented, even though it's been signed. They've got to finalise the controversial decision to allow Indian workers employed by Indian businesses sent to Britain to forego national insurance. Now, that's controversial because we don't have the details of just how generous the scheme will be, because it's all still being worked out. Yes, there are similar schemes in other countries, but it does all depend on the detail. And thirdly, one thing that might come up between Modi and Starmer, and this did catch my eye, Keir Starmer has been telling us how the Indian system of digital ID might be a model for the UK. India's got a version of the scheme. It's called Aadhaar. It's been introduced over the last 15 years to almost all of India's 1.4 billion citizens. Yesterday, Keir Starmer met Nandan Nilekani, the non-exec chair of the tech company Infosys. Of course, that's the one run by Rishi Sunak's relatives, to discuss the speed of the rollout in India and the transformation of the benefit system, which they say has cut bureaucracy. Keir Starmer wanting to suggest that there are workable models for how this could be rolled out, after some criticism in Liverpool that it was an announcement without a plan behind it. So let's see if that comes up. Right, just a little bit on how the trip has been going down. We did a film yesterday for Sky, and I interviewed several of the business leaders who are accompanying Keir Starmer. And if I'm being honest, Anne, I was a bit surprised just quite how punchy several of them are about things. And in a moment, I'm going to play you a bit of what they said to me. To be clear, they are absolutely delighted to be on the trip and very warm about the fact that Keir Starmer is helping them to get deeper into India. But if you actually turn the subject to the state of the economy back home and the challenges back home with the British economy, you can make up your own mind. Listen for yourself. Right, you can listen to three voices here. The first one is Tom Cartledge. He's the CEO of the big architecture firm Benoy. Then Siobhan Haviland, a familiar voice on Sky. She's the Director General at the British Chambers of Commerce. And then Rohan Malik, who is a managing partner at EY. So listen to a bit of this.
We're having to go and find new markets because what we do, design big projects, infrastructure, real estate, towers, residential, retail, it's just not happening in the UK. So we're coming overseas to try and find that.
We want to see no more tax for business.
And are you guys saying that to him now?
Yeah, we are. We're saying that to him, to the business secretary, to the chancellor.
And what do they say back?
They hear us.
I think it's going to be tricky for the Chancellor. I don't envy her position at all. To be looking at different levers she's got at her disposal. Businesses will not like more taxation. At the same time, we have to be prepared to understand how do we try and contribute more towards economic growth.
I just thought it was worth playing you that because I can't remember business delegations being so pointed when I've been on these sorts of trips before. Anyway, my sense is Number 10 is pretty pleased with how this trip has gone down. It hasn't eclipsed Kemi Badenoch's speech yesterday, and it will likely be drowned out by the news of the Trump ceasefire today.
No doubt there about the no more tax message from the senior business crowd that Sam was travelling with, and where to tax, cut and spend, of course, have been at the heart of discussion across the last 2 weeks for Labour and the Tories at their tribe gatherings. And there was a kind of mirror image. Both leaders arrived on the ropes with their own members. Both have internal competitors for their crown. Both needed to make a mark with a sceptical electorate, making plans for Nigel and Reform UK. But beyond the conference fanfare, what's the real state of opinion among the faithful, the members? Sam and I sat down with our regular pollster, Patrick English from YouGov, and here's the conversation.
So we're sitting here in Manchester at Party Conference in the back room of the Politico pub because we've managed to grab some time with Patrick English, Grand Fromage at YouGov, who does all their political polling, and we have just got the results of the Tory membership polling, the exclusive membership polling that we want to just do a deep dive on. Now, Anne, why do we care about this stuff?
Together now, the only poll that matters is on election day. That is what any leader who is not going through good times or any party will tell you when you start presenting them with some brilliant polling from YouGov. Actually, we know it's not true. One, because parties take this very seriously. Secondly, because it changes the narrative, because it highlights what people are thinking, and politics is a reactive business. It's a feedback loop. That if you look at the Conservative Party at the moment, it would be completely a denial of reality to say that there is not a huge argument about its future. So polling can cast a bit of light on it, while everyone else is saying, I can't really comment on that. Sam, draw back the curtain. What's the headline?
The main finding of the Politics at Sam and Anne's YouGov Tory members poll, and you may have heard a little whisper of this, is that half of all Conservative members think Kemi Badenoch should not lead the party into the next election. 50% say that she shouldn't, 46% say that she should. Tory members are also split on whether she'll even make it that far. 49% think that she'll be out compared to 47% who think that she'll still be in place, who just marginally within the margin of error. That's the case. That's the headline, Patrick, and maybe some of our listeners might have absorbed a little bit of that already, but dig down into the deep into the data. What is that telling us?
It's a really good question. I think the interesting thing here, when you read through all of the numbers and look across all the cross breaks, there's a story that I think emerges from this headline figure of the 50% saying that she should not be leader of the next election. And it's not that the party members think that she's done a bad job. By 61% to 37%, they think she's done rather well as Conservative Party leader as opposed to badly. And it's not that she's particularly unpopular. 70% have a favourable opinion of Kemi Badenoch, 29% have an unfavourable opinion of Kemi Badenoch. And that score, by the way, of plus 41 on the net makes Kemi Badenoch more popular with her own membership than Keir Starmer is with his. He's only on plus 33 with his own members. But the sense that I'm getting, and the sense I think we're all getting from these figures, is that the Conservative Party membership is not that they don't like Kemi Badenoch, but they just don't think that she's up to an election. They just don't think that she's the one that should be taking them through to the next general.
So 46% there, Patrick, said that she should stay in place. 50%, which feels a bit logically or otherwise like a bit of a magic number, not in a good way for Kemi Badenoch there. I'm intrigued by the fact that you then get a lower, still substantive, but a lower split when it comes on to whether she would make it that far, which then is 49 think she'll be out before the next election, 47% think she'll still be in place. Now, as well as doing the polling, you're director of political sort of analysis. What do you make of that difference?
Yeah, I think it's an interesting one. Look, with all these polls, particularly with the sample size of around about 650, 700, there is a margin of error, as sort of Sam's kind of alluded to. So they're kind of split there. Whether or not they want her to go, they're also kind of split in that direction as well. So we could take these numbers as perhaps effectively equal. I do think there is something in it, though, and I think there might be a little bit of difference in the sort of, let's say, the regicide versus the what would I like to happen. And I think the second question perhaps gets a little bit more about what's going to happen sort of on the regicide thing. The first question perhaps a little bit more about the, what would I like.
Let's move on. Let's talk about who might replace Kemi Badenoch. And we asked who they would prefer. These are the Tory members, of course, that we spoke to, YouGov spoke to before the party conference in Manchester, who they would prefer as leader of the Conservative Party. So a year ago they picked Kemi Badenoch, but now that has reversed. 46% of Tory members picked Robert Jenrick, Shadow Justice Secretary, one-time challenger, comfortably ahead of the 39% who said they'd pick Kemi Badenoch if there was a contest right away. 11% said neither, 4% don't know. And actually, when you look at the numbers, Jenrick is way out in front of the other contenders. If you did a head-to-head, lots of different head-to-heads, and actually this is what YouGov did with the Tory members, Jenrick would beat Boris Johnson, James Cleverly and Priti Patel. So that's pretty much the field as we know it at the moment. So there is one man to watch.
There certainly is. And what struck me from this data was the relative lack of appetite, perhaps, for the princes across the water versus the prince in the tower. And by that, of course, we're looking at people outside the party, like Boris Johnson, Nigel Farage, even Liz Truss. Kemi Badenoch actually doesn't lose to any of them in a head-to-head situation. So it's not as if the party membership are looking for somebody outside to come in and save the party. But as you say, when we put her up against Robert Jenrick, the person who she beat, who these very members put in place over Jenrick just a year ago, Jenrick now comes out on top. And that's driven, by the way, by 30% of those who backed Kemi Badenoch a year ago now saying they prefer Jenrick.
So in the event that there's a leadership contest, one of the things that's going to be on the table, undoubtedly, is the question of what to do, what on earth to do with Reform UK. Out front in the polls, and a fellow party to the right who, bluntly cost them a lot of seats at the last election. Do they work together with them next time round, or do they continue their process, their policy of duking it out for every vote? Now, Kemi Badenoch's absolutely clear, and in fact she was very clear to Iran, and you don't say something to Iran and go back on your word. She was clear that there will be no pacts, no deals, nothing like that with Reform. But, and here is the massive finding of this poll, by a 2-to-1 margin, 64% to 31%, Tory members support an electoral pact, as defined as Reform and the Tories not standing candidates against each other in target seats, right? By 2-to-1. And half of members, almost half of members, 46%, would support a full-blown merger with Reform UK as opposed to 48 who would. But that, I mean, it's incredible. That is effectively the end of the Conservative Party, the longest standing political force in British political history. Incredible.
It's very, very significant, and I think it speaks to the conundrum that the party finds itself in, and the membership by these figures are well aware of it. As you said, we only have to think back to July last year. Labour's victory, impressive as it was really delivered by the fact that Reform UK came in and smashed up the Conservatives' electoral coalition that won them the election in 2019. Labour barely had to move in many constituencies to win the seats because Reform were just eating away the Conservative Party vote share. Now, one little nugget that I found here, just beneath these headline numbers, is that the idea of a merger, of course, it splits the Conservative Party membership right down the middle. But it seems to have become something of a wedge issue for the Brexit tribes within the Conservative Party. So 53% of Conservative Party members who voted to leave in the 2016 EU referendum said that they would support a merger with Reform UK. But that drops down to 32% of Remainers. So if we're thinking about increasingly the future of the Conservative Party and what that might look like, could it be that these old Leave-Remain divides become crucial in shaping that forward conversation?
That's just an interesting point when we have a discussion in the bigger picture of politics is Brexit all over as a theme, or you're suggesting it could actually be quite decisive here when it comes to future relations with reform or any form of deal. But what struck me, Patrick, was this kind of the full-blown merger Sam described as the official sort of death of the historic Conservative Party as we have known it. 46% would support a full-blown merger with Reform, 48% against. I wondered whether people who are going into that posture are sort of thinking, well, it's a Fortnum and Mason's kind of agreement, this will be, it will just be better. Of course, what you couldn't really track is what people think they're getting in a merger or in a pact. And we all have a bit of an optimism bias, even around here at a slightly downbeat Conservative Party conference. Do you think that people are very clear about what they're saying? Or do they just think, well, that must be better than it is now, and I'll take this option rather than the stars as we have?
It's a very important point. I think there's no doubt that among that sort of very high percentage of people that say yes to a merger, there's a bit of rose-tinted glasses going on there. I'm certain that many of those in support are thinking, yes, in a couple of years' time, the Conservatives will have re-emerged, Reform will be the lower party, we shall simply absorb them and their supporters, and that will be to the benefit of the Conservatives. Undoubtedly, of course, in the polling question, we didn't go into the nuances or the deals, so that is something I think that will be happening, but then others might just be being pragmatic and saying, look, the vote on the right is split, we need to unite it, and we just have to get that merger done, whatever it looks like.
We are almost at the end of party conference season. The sort of the final minutes are counting down, and some would say thank goodness for that, but not me. However, Patrick, you and YouGov have super served Anne and me with so much polling, the polling projection, the MRP, a Labour members poll, a Tory members poll. So looking at everything that you've given to us, I'm going to ask you a maybe impossible question. Who's doing worse, Tory or Labour?
I think the Conservatives are in the worst position. I think Labour, look, they're in a very tough spot themselves. They are the party of government. They're attracting all of the negative public opinion that generates. They are themselves sort of dropping in the polls. But the Conservatives, for them it's an existential crisis, and I think the polling data that we've released today shows that even some of the members are thinking in that direction. I think Labour seem to be, at least sort of from the top, from the projection, they're trying to get themselves, they're trying to get the public, their supporters up for the fight. For the Conservatives, I think the fight is for their very existence, and I think that's sort of two different realities, and I'd say with that sort of view, is the Conservatives who are in the worst position.
Can I make a special request for your next round of polling, Patrick?
Of course.
Getting a favour here across the table. When next time we're asking about mergers and schmergers, etc., can we please know how does it change depending on who's Prime Minister, who's Chancellor?
Absolutely.
Do that for me?
I would indeed.
One of the greatest pleasures of this conference season is hanging out with both of my partners, with Anne and with Patrick, with my Politico side and my YouGov side. And actually, I think we make a pretty good threesome. So on that note, I want to say, Patrick, we want you back soon. Thank you for everything you do.
Well, that's all from us today. Sam will be sending me envy-inducing pictures from his India jaunt. The last one was of him dancing energetically on a Mumbai pavement, and he tells me it's all in the line of work. We'll be back in your feed again on Monday.